Hello, I'm Andre J, and today I would like to talk to you about the 1.5 updates for Waaave Pool. This is a part of a series where I'll be going through all of the new updates as of January 25th, 26th, whatever today is. All of the new and updated images for the 1.5 VSERPI are available on my website. All relevant links will be in the description. And yeah, I'm going to be making videos for, not every single one of the things, but everything that's really got like significantly updated and upgraded or introduced this time around. I'm going to make sure that we have videos that go through all of the details of what's going on. If you haven't updated your image yet, check out the video that I just finished making and posted like 1 second before I did this one, where I go into how to update your image, or just check the link in the description and you'll be able to find text information on how to update your image. Also relevant to what is going on with the future of the VSERPI is Too Long Don't Read. The actual production of Raspberry Pis has become scarce, which has led me to shut down my Etsy shop. So usually in these things I tell people, oh, go check out my Etsy shop, you can buy one of these. You can't buy one of these right now, and it's also going to be really hard for anybody to make their own. If you go to my website, you'll be able to sign up for a mailing list where I'll be offering sort of limited batch run of production whenever I get my hands on stuff. I really have no idea when exactly that will be. I know that it will be in the future, and maybe it'll be 2 months from now, maybe it'll be 6 months from now, maybe it'll be next year. But the best way to get notified if you're interested in getting involved with the limited production runs is to sign up for that mailing list. The other thing that I'd like to talk about is that I am considering not actually going back to full-time selling the Raspberry Pi VSERPI units anymore, partially because of this sort of, when you get like fucked over by production chain things like this, it really makes you think about how much you depend on stuff that is way beyond your control for regular income. And also because I personally feel like the general lifestyle of like running a business and like devoting so much of my energy to like advertising things on social media is kind of like making me think about video art and video art tool production in a really kind of cynical and unpleasant way. And I would really like to sort of change things up. So one model of making things more interesting and possibly more productive for everybody in the future is that I've started like a Patreon page, and it's basically where you can just pledge an amount of money to donate to me on a monthly basis to keep up not just development of the VSERPI in terms of updating, fixing, maintaining, introducing new titles, but also making the desktop versions of all of these accessible, like more accessible to everyone. They're theoretically accessible right now, but for some people it can be really tricky to set them up. And since no one who doesn't already have a VSERPI isn't going to be able to get at them, for people who are interested in getting into this kind of stuff and don't want to wait for Raspberry Pis to show up in the world again, the desktop stuff is the way to go. And if you're, if enough people, like, all it would really take is a couple hundred people like pledging $5 a month for it to be more than feasible for me to spend full time working on development, R&D, and making educational stuff, instead of having to, negotiate with warehouses in China for overpriced, probably maybe like, I don't know, for Raspberry Pis and stuff like that. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe it will work out, maybe it won't, but either way, let's go into Waaave Pool 1.5. So the main things I'm going to talk about in this video, the most interesting updates and things that might kind of goof someone up. So we have Midi latching, we have a Sharpen filter involved, we have a mirror mode for wrapping around, and we also have video reactive controls. So I'll go through each one of these, but first off I just kind of want to show something new that I introduced with the 1.5 updates is, so if we turn ours off and then we boot it back on again, this will be just like a handy way for everyone to know like whether or not they're update to the most current version. And if if I do keep developing more updates and versions of these, I'll make sure to like add a little like version number thing in the splash screen like I'll have here. But wait, did we even see the splash screen? Come on. Well, you can see that the desktop image is different from the last one, because usually the desktop image was that hypercube thing, and I just wanted to change the desktop image as well, because sometimes they're really weird about not showing their splash screens like randomly for no reason. Yeah, I guess this one doesn't want to show the splash screen this time. Alright, thanks a lot. If it did show the splash screen, it would say 1.5 in the corner, but you can also see that there's a different background image for all of the 1.5 versions. So you know you'll have the most up-to-date version if you also have the new background image. Oh yeah, yeah. But yeah, probably the first thing to talk about, and what might kind of confuse people when they're working with the new versions, is I've implemented Midi latching. What Midi latching means is it's a pretty common thing used on, like, you know, when there's an analog interface and a digital synthesizer, is that if you move the knobs, like, okay, you can see I've got the nano controller here, and if I, like, so I've got Luma key right here, and I would recommend having like a little copy of like the control scheme like guide thing where it says like 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D, and all the numbers and the letters, because I'll be referring to that for controls. So number 1, Luma key. You can see as I just move this around, it's not doing anything yet. What Midi latching means is that I'll have to go back to 0, which is the default, and then if I go forward, then the Luma key works. So this will prevent the kind of like sudden jumps that happen. For some of these synths, like, it's not really a huge issue because like pressing buttons doesn't really go back and forth between different modes. On the other hand, if you played with Artificial Life or Phosform or the audio reactive ones, you may have noticed that like when you switch from audio reactive to regular mode, there's these sudden jumps, or you switch from like different oscillator modes in Artificial Life, like the controls just kind of like lurch from one to another. And I decided I needed to fix that because it was getting too annoying. So that's why Midi latching has been implemented for nearly everything. So basically, it's going to take probably a second to get used to, and after that, you'll be totally fine with it. But yeah, just heads up that Midi latching, you're going to want to read up and make sure you know what the default controls like set are for everything. For most everything on Waaave Pool, we're talking about bipolar controls, meaning that they go from -1 to +1. So like default is going to be right in the middle, so you have to go through 0. For a handful of things like Luma key, Sharpen, and filter resonance and delay time, it's 0, meaning like they're unipolar. So 0 is like all the way off, and you have to go all the way off to get things to go back on. Like for instance, if I want to do delay time, I can move the delay time slider all I want, but if I don't go back to 0 and then move up, that's when we get the delay shifted. So yeah, I think this will make it a lot more useful in a performative manner, and make all of these things more useful in a performative manner. And once you start playing around with the video reactive component of these synths, you'll really see why this makes a difference. Alright, so that is Midi latching. The next really nifty thing we've added to this is the Sharpen filter. So Sharpen filter it's number 8. It has replaced what used to be input contrast on the previous versions. And what Sharpen does is it's a little, it's about the cheapest sharpening filter I could figure out how to put in there. And it just adds like basically these kind of crazy worms to everything. So this definitely kind of like changes the game in terms of making your video feedback here sort of look more like if you've ever played with like camera feedback that has like some sort of like, usually like CCD cameras that have like a built-in DSP like sharpening into them, they'll do this a lot. Or if you work with camera feedback and you have like LCD screens that have upscaling and sharpening built into the screen, you'll see these kind of things. You've definitely seen it if you've looked on my YouTube long enough and you've seen the kind of like camera feedback experiments I do. But yeah, we'll be doing some more experiments with this kind of stuff throughout this video just to show you how much fun it is. But yeah, that's the basic thing about sharpening. We have a mirror mode. So some of you might remember, or some of you might know already, so we've got this thing called toroidal universe. And toroidal universe means that if something goes off this side of the screen, it's going to come back over on this side of the screen. It means, and same thing with up and down. Things just kind of wrap around. But another really interesting pattern you can get, so if you press H, what you'll get is mirror mode, and I think if I invert black and white, we'll see it a little bit more strongly. And I'm just going to key out all of the input video. So mirror mode, it kind of looks pretty similar to toroidal universe at first. Where the real difference comes in is once we start to rotate things. So we can see that's definitely different from the toroidal universe stuff. Actually, maybe it's kind of strobing a little bit. That's going to be a little... So what we do to set things up a little bit smoother. So we'll turn the bright down, turn the sharpen up. There we go. So let's just do like a cross comparison, or actually here's an idea. I'll turn invert on and I'll slow it down a little bit and I'll put the filter on so it doesn't strobe so heavily. There we go. And if you're curious about what I just did, check out the episode of Exploring the VSERPI where I discuss how to, what do you call that? Where I discuss how to get out of strobe zones. So I'll go into detail about what I just did there and also some other fun stuff. But yeah, so we can see sort of, let me just do a cross compare. So if I switch over to toroidal universe, this is what we see. Let me turn off the sharpening a bit so we just see the more kind of traditional invert feedback thing. So here's no wraparound at all, and that's where you get this kind of stuff happening, where it's very much like the traditional kind of camera inverted feedback thing you would see here. And now if I turn on toroidal universe, you can see that it kind of fractalizes things in a really noisy way. And if I then switch on over to mirror, you can see, you know, I'm not really sure like how to articulate the exact differences. Maybe if we slow it down, we can see it happen a little stronger. But it seems to kind of wrap around and like kaleidoscope things a bit more. Yeah, don't really know what the best language is to describe it, but it's pretty cool, and it seems to make sort of a different kind of fractal happen. I wonder if I can add some color into here. Interesting than just like the black and white fractalizing things. But yeah, so that's mirror modes. Another interesting thing to note, let me just reset everything here, is that if you've been playing with the Waaave Pool for a while, you know I had this sort of hue invert mode. It didn't really seem to work very well, especially if you had like any kind of experience working with like hue inversion on like like an Adderall or something. But I've tweaked the hue inversion a little bit, so I think it works a little bit better, or at least it's kind of doing something like more dynamic than it was. The main thing you kind of want to do when you have the hue invert is play with like the hue X mod things and offsets, and that's where you kind of get these more sort of like really strange color zones happening. But yeah, so hue invert, give it a shot. I've also kind of tweaked all of the bright hue and saturation like amounts to be a little bit different, trying to add a bit more potential for subtlety in things. If there's a massive outcry about like changing the ranges on things, I can switch them back in the next update, or I can just make another video that shows you how to change the values, like default values for things on your own. Because I think in the long run it will be more interesting and useful for everyone if I kind of make more, if I'm able to have time and do afford to make more videos that sort of just go into how everyone will be able to do this kind of stuff on their own. Alright, so MIDI latching, sharpen, mirror, and then the next thing would be video reactive mode. So this is kind of the most exciting thing and probably what we'll spend a lot of time in this video. So, alright. So video reactive mode, if you played with the desktop video waves before, this is what I call text mod over there. Video reactive means that you can use the input video, which is this video right here, the video you're seeing, in order to control parameters. I have often said to people, people are always, not always, but a lot of people are often like, you got to make everything audio reactive. Audio reactive is the best. And my usual response is, this is video, and you're making something audio reactive when it's already like video, the dimensions are off. Like if you make things audio reactive, it's going to change things on a frame. But if you think about it, video has a lot more information than audio, so you're not really able to use like two-dimensional video information to transform things, which is a lot more dynamic. But I figured probably not, many more people seem to use the Waaave pools than use the video waves, and part of this update thing was to bring my favorite things from video waves over into Waaave pool, so I just figured we got to show people what does video reactive mean. So make sure to key basically everything out, but you'll be able to see more or less what the camera is seeing. This camera up here isn't like a duplicate of what's going in, but it's almost essentially the same. So in order to access video reactive mode, you're going to press the N button, which is right by, you'll check, it's the S button, which is right next to the delay slider. What I'm referring to is the little schematic that tells you what the controls are. And then what this does is it changes all of the parameters so that when you move things, instead of directly adjusting X for everything on the screen, it's going to say directly just change X depending on how bright something is. So let me just show you what happens when I do that. So you can see that this sort of changes things up in a more dynamic two-dimensional way. I'm changing the brightness, I'm changing the saturation, I'm going to add some hue in. This is where you can really see where the video reactive thing gets kind of nice and goopy. So if I turn this up a lot, you can kind of see as I move my head around, it's changing a lot of what's going on with the texture. I'm going to change hue X mod a bunch. And I'm going to shift Y a bit. Maybe do a little bit of rotation. Some zoom. So pretty crazy, right? I'm going to exit out of video reactive mode, and because MIDI latching is what's going on right now, MIDI latching means when you go from one mode to another, the MIDI controls won't latch back on and change something. They won't immediately jump to whatever value they're at until we go through where they were at before. So because I didn't really have anything, I had pretty much everything except for Luma key set to default, so that means for all of the parameters that I want to change now, I'm going to have to go back up to 0. But yeah, you can see my head sort of outlined in the blobs here. If I do something like, let's turn the MIDI latching back on, and then have Sharpen be activated via the video reactive mode, and then add Sharpen up a little bit more. Ooh. That's interesting. It's doing some crazy color stuff now. Didn't really expect that. Woo! But yeah, it'll really start to get interesting if you have, one of the main reasons I did this in video wave in the first place is because I wanted to think of using artificial life as a feedback video oscillator control unit. And probably make one video that just kind of goes into the details of how I do something like that. But if you're curious about like what potential use cases you can have for this, I would say think about using like another live feed of like video feedback, or the live feed of like if you're doing some live visuals for a band, use the live feed of the band to sort of affect these things in like a real-time manner. And it kind of adds like a different flavor and depth to everything, and sort of gives things more of a crazy like rendered 3D texture than they would otherwise. So that's video reactive modes in a nutshell. And I think probably for the rest of this video, I'll just kind of focus on what some crazy stuff we can do with these new things are. Just talk about what I'm doing in the midst of everything. So probably one of my favorite things to do is I'm going to turn off mirror mode for now. And I kind of want to play with some of these rotations and the sharpen. Some pretty cool color here. I'm actually going to reset and start over from 0. So to rotate things. Turn on the sharpen a bit. Make sure to turn up brightness. One thing to notice about sharpening is that sharpening and brightness sort of work together in an interesting way, where you kind of end up losing a bit of your brightness when you sharpen. So I just made sure to crank the brightness, and I also brought in a little bit of the filter, the temporal filter. But you can see right here that using sharpen and rotate together gives you this sort of classic reaction diffusion rotational symmetry pattern. And as we kind of zoom in and out, you get some pretty interesting textures going on. If you've played with like camera feedback and rotations, you've definitely seen this kind of stuff before. I'm adjusting the brightness up and down too, because that can kind of help give different textures to everything. And I've changed the rotational range a bit, so we can kind of come in and out. We're just getting like some interesting concentric circles at the moment. Zoom in, zoom out, and try to bring up brightness a bit more. Ooh, this is a pretty fun one. This specific mode is maybe where I get the most distracted by with the new update. So if you want to turn on some of the symmetry modes, that'll change up and make things more stellated than they would be otherwise. If we want to sort of get away from this kind of like rigid symmetry thing, probably want to like do some XY displacement things. And to really kind of spice things up in this mode, I'm going to turn on a little bit of the video reactive stuff. So video reactive on, and then I'm just going to do the tiniest bit of X displacement, and that'll kind of throw enough interesting noise in there. I'll do a little bit of Y displacement too. And I'll just add like kind of a little bit of enough noise to sort of keep things moving. I want to make sure I don't go too bright or too dark. Find like the sweet spot in there. And you can see as I just move my head around and just change the input a little bit, it's kind of it's doing some more dynamic things with the patterns. Alright, fun times with worms. That's the name of this zone. Fun worms. You can do some pretty cool stuff with the inverts as well. Makes things really textured. Yeah, another classic thing we can do. So let me turn off that sort of stuff, bring back up a spiral, and then I'm going to turn back on video reactive mode. I hit N again, and I'm going to zoom in so that video will zoom in based upon myself. Let me just go very zoomed in, and then turn that back in, and then zoom the video out otherwise. So that's pretty grungy. Another thing I can do is if I just put my hand over the camera when there's a lot of video reactive stuff, it just kind of shuts everything off for the moment. So you can kind of bypass everything in a really hacky way by just going like that. So you can sort of like do light theremin things if you wanted to, just like wave your hands in the air and have it like affect the video in a really weird way. Let's see, other fun video reactive stuff. So let me key everything out. Then turn on video reactive, and let me just turn on hue, what do you call it? Hue offset, and then saturation increase, and brightness maximize. There we go. I'll just play with some different values of hue offset, and then I'm actually going to take hue and turn it like almost all the way down. So you can see that we can get these little interesting thresholds where it's going to kind of cycle a little bit. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So you can see that it's doing this real-time, like, blobby thing. So I haven't changed X, Y, Z or any of that stuff at all. I'm really just trying to get this kind of really distinct outlines of everything in the color. Mess around with hue LFO a little bit. Also play around with hue X mod. Yeah, that's where it really kind of helps things out. Keep in mind, this effect works best if you don't have any of the geometry things on. I'll show you what happens when I start to do some geometry things. So let me try doing zoom out. That's pretty cool still. We're losing a little bit. Zoom in, turn off video reactive, and have the video itself zoom out. You can see we're getting some interesting depth happening here. I'm probably going to want to add some sharpen a little bit just to kind of like see what's going on a little bit stronger. Sharpen it up. To play around with the brightness for you to see what's really going on with the sharpen. Yeah, that's a pretty cool mode. You can see as soon as I start moving X and Y around, we lose a bit of the definition. Go back on, turn on video reactive, and I'm going to increase the Z range and have it really just kind of blast out. And then we'll do the same thing by having it zoom way out. So you get this really kind of sharp, distinct thing happening. Playing around with the brightness amount right now. Let me also turn on video reactive and just have it rotate a tiny bit. Oop, we're losing it. I turned on the vertical and horizontal mirrors. Increased X and Y ranges, and I'm just going to try painting things like that. Oop, lost it all. Turn on mirror mode for fun here. Oh yeah, so one other really crazy thing we can do with video reactive mode that I didn't even think about until like after I enacted it is you can do some pretty crazy stuff using dry mode. And also I just want to remind everyone that dry mode exists. So dry mode so there's two ways you can have a delay line. two sort of like delay line modes, and these are also the two kind of filter modes you have, because filters are based on delay. You can have feedback or feed forward. So feedback means that the final output is fed back into the input. Feed forward means that only the input is fed into the filter thing, so that we don't have actual like loops, feedback loops happening. We just have sort of a direct input coming into the filter thing. To apply the dry mode, feed forward mode, make sure to hit the little R button next to the delay amount. It is L on the control scheme. So L, and let me just show you what happens. So if I key things out, you can see what's happening is it's just keying like a frame behind. If I increase the delay amount, what it's going to do is like echo the input, but it's not going to feedback anything. It's just always going to be doing a fixed delay of the input. But what else you can do with it is to sort of, you can use all of the Waaave Pool processes on this delayed thing. And once you start to add the, what do you call it, video reactive things onto it, it gets kind of insane. But just to sort of reiterate how this works, if I'd say press black and white invert, it's just going to invert the video. If I just bring it up to like the delay amount till it's just like one frame behind, you would barely be able to tell. But you can see it inverts the video. If I do like zoom in and zoom out, you can see it's got like the mirror mode thing happening. So this is sort of like a very classic VJE thing to do. The rotations just kind of do that. X and Y displays do that. So it's not feeding back. It's just basically you're able to do this very, like a lot of basic like VJ like PE kind of effects on your input video. Where this really comes in handy for me personally is if you feed like a really simple artificial life input or any kind of like really like simple minimalist input, and you can sort of like chain it up with like echoes of its past, but not have it be just like dominated by the sort of psychedelic feedback, just be using literal like delay, like video delay, to sort of like layer alternate versions of itself over itself. But yeah, let me show you a little bit of the crazy stuff that happens once we start doing, what do you call it, the video reactive. So I'm keyed about 75% of the input video off, which you can see by like the weird kind of sketchiness. So if I sharpen things, because it's not feeding back, it's not really going to do that sort of wormy stuff. Not every time. But if I sharpen things and then I turn on the temporal filter, then we're going to get some worms happening. Because the temporal filter, whether you're in wet or dry mode, is always a feedback filter. It doesn't really functionally work very well as a temporal filter otherwise. But if I turn on video reactive mode, and then I start doing some X displacement, that's pretty weird. You gotta kind of sometimes turn it up. Let me turn off all of the input video, so I'm gonna key everything out. So we'll just kind of turn back on video reactive mode and start doing some insane amounts of displacement. So you can see how it's, I don't even know how to describe this. This is basically like some insane glitch video, like accidental like nonsense happening here. But yeah, this is a mode. If you have an idea for what you would want to call this mode in the comments, let me know. Like, I don't know, 90s VJ barf mode, digital bad trip mode, I don't know. Start playing around with the color stuff. The color stuff will probably always start over from like non-insane to begin with, and then we can do some color stuff. So I press the reset buttons, and now I'm hitting Hue X Mod. You can see it's doing like some strange colorizing kind of stuff here. Then I'm going to crank up the saturation to get the full effect. But that's pretty juicy, yo. I'm going to use Hue X LFO. Hue X Mod, crank up the hue knob up and down. So This is kind of like a weird colorizer thing going on. It's not actually like a colorizer, and I'll tell you more about what an actual colorizer is in the video that we'll be doing pretty soon about chromatic aberration, the search for Sasquatch, an 8-band colorizer solarizer that is now available for the VSERPI. But yeah, so that's some crazy stuff we can do with the old, what do you call it, dry mode, wet mode. And if you can see, as soon as I switch to feedback, it's going to go into this kind of crazy noise. And I switch back into dry mode, it goes right into that. Turn back on the feedback, and it takes a second to like blob its way on over. But yeah, I think that covers about most of the basics you'll need to know to get started with the new updated version of Waaave Pool. As always, let me know if this was helpful. If you have any questions, concerns in the comments, make sure to, if you would like to, subscribe to the Patreon thingy and or donate some money to my PayPal. What else? Yeah. I guess, as always, have fun.